The bright Saturday afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of Golden Gate Jewelry, casting sparkling reflections across the polished display cases. The store buzzed with weekend shoppers browsing rings, necklaces, and watches behind gleaming glass counters. Lisa Martinez pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside with her 10-year-old son, Billy. The cool air conditioning was a welcome relief from the warm California day outside. Billy stayed close to his mother's side, his dark eyes darting around the fancy store with its shiny surfaces and expensive items. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart?" Lisa whispered gently to her son. "We're just looking for something nice for Grandma Rosa's birthday." Billy nodded and made a small clicking sound with his tongue. It was one of his tics, something he couldn't control because of his Tourette's syndrome. Lisa had explained to him many times that his brain worked a little differently, and these sounds and movements were just part of who he was. Behind the main counter, Derek Collins looked up from organizing a tray of diamond earrings. At 24 years old, Derek thought he was hot stuff working at the most expensive jewelry store in the mall. He wore a crisp white shirt and black tie, and always made sure his blonde hair was perfectly styled. Derek liked to think he could spot the serious customers from the window shoppers just by looking at them. When he saw Lisa and Billy approach, Derek's eyes narrowed. The woman was dressed nicely enough in her blue dress and cardigan, but something about the kid bothered him immediately. Billy made another clicking sound, followed by a quick shoulder jerk that made his whole body twitch. "Great," Derek muttered under his breath to his co-worker Amy Peterson, who was arranging a display of gold bracelets nearby. "Here comes trouble." Amy glanced over and saw the mother and son looking at a case of necklaces. She was only 19 and had been working at the store for just 3 months. Amy had learned to follow Derek's lead since he had been there longer and seemed to know what he was doing. Lisa stopped in front of a display case filled with delicate silver and gold necklaces. She bent down to get a better look at a beautiful silver chain with a small heart pendant. It was exactly the kind of thing her mother-in-law would love. "Mom, this one is pretty," Billy said, pressing his face close to the glass. As he spoke, he made a series of quick clicking sounds, and his head jerked to the right twice. Derek watched from across the store and rolled his eyes dramatically. He started mimicking Billy's head movements behind the counter, exaggerating the motion and making faces. Amy saw what Derek was doing and looked uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything. "Excuse me," Lisa called out politely. "Could we take a look at this silver necklace with the heart pendant?" Derek sighed loudly and walked over slowly, as if helping customers was the last thing he wanted to do. He had his keys ready and made a show of being annoyed. "Which one?" Derek asked in a bored tone, not bothering to smile. "The silver one with the small heart," Lisa repeated, pointing to the piece she wanted to see. Derek unlocked the case and pulled out the necklace, but instead of handing it to Lisa properly, he dangled it carelessly in the air. Billy made another clicking sound, and his shoulder twitched again. "Does he always do that?" Derek asked rudely, staring directly at Billy. Lisa's face tightened. She had dealt with this kind of reaction before, but it never stopped hurting. "My son has Tourette's syndrome. He can't help the sounds he makes." "Tourette's," Derek repeated slowly, like he was tasting something unpleasant. "Right." He looked back at Amy and made a mocking clicking sound with his own tongue, then grinned. Billy heard the sound and looked up at Derek with confusion. Even at 10 years old, Billy could tell when someone was making fun of him. His tics got worse when he was nervous or upset, and now his clicking became more frequent. "How much is the necklace?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her voice steady and focus on why they had come to the store. $250, Derek said, still holding the necklace carelessly. "Plus tax." Lisa nodded. It was more than she had hoped to spend, but it was her mother-in-law's 70th birthday, and she wanted to get something special. "Could I hold it to see how it looks?" Derek was about to hand over the necklace when Billy's tics suddenly got stronger. The boy made a series of loud clicking sounds followed by what sounded like a small bark. His whole body jerked, and his elbow bumped into a small display stand holding rings. The stand wobbled but didn't fall over. Nothing was damaged, but Derek acted like Billy had destroyed the entire store. "Hey!" Derek shouted, pulling the necklace back. "Watch what you're doing." "I'm sorry," Billy said quietly, his face turning red. "I didn't mean to." "Billy, it's okay," Lisa said, putting her arm around her son's shoulders. "You didn't hurt anything." But Derek wasn't finished. He looked at Billy like the boy was some kind of dangerous animal. "Maybe you should keep better control of him," he said to Lisa. "This is expensive stuff here." Amy shifted uncomfortably behind her counter. She knew Derek was being mean, but she was too scared of him to speak up. Derek had a way of making the other employees feel small when they disagreed with him. What none of them noticed was the tall man with long, dark hair browsing quietly in the back section of the store. He wore simple jeans and a black t-shirt, and had been looking at some vintage watches when the family walked in. The man had been watching the entire interaction, and his jaw was getting tighter with each cruel word from Derek. Keanu Reeves had stopped into the jewelry store during a break from filming a movie nearby. He often preferred to shop in regular stores rather than have assistants do everything for him. He liked to stay connected to everyday life and real people. Now, as he watched this young employee mock a child with a disability, Keanu felt his anger building. He had always been protective of people who were being treated unfairly, especially children. Something about this situation reminded him of his own difficult childhood, and the times when he had felt helpless and different. Billy's tics were getting worse as his anxiety increased. He was making more sounds now, and his shoulder was jerking every few seconds. Lisa could see her son was getting upset, which always made his condition worse. "We'll take the necklace," Lisa said firmly, wanting to complete the purchase and get Billy out of there as quickly as possible. "Actually," Derek said with a nasty smile, "I'm not sure we can sell to customers who might damage our merchandise." Store policy. There was no such policy, and Amy knew it. She also knew that Derek was just being cruel for no reason except that he enjoyed having power over people. But she still said nothing, frozen by her own fear and inexperience. That was when Keanu decided he had heard enough. Keanu stepped forward from the back of the store, his footsteps quiet on the polished marble floor. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who had faced much harder situations than this one. His dark eyes were focused on Derek, and there was something in his expression that would have warned a smarter person to back down. "Excuse me," Keanu said in a low, steady voice. "Is there a problem here?" Derek turned around, annoyed that another customer was getting involved in what he thought was his business. He looked at the tall man with the long hair and casual clothes, and decided he wasn't someone important enough to worry about. "No problem," Derek said with fake politeness. "Just explaining our store policies to this family." Billy made another series of clicking sounds, and his head jerked to the side twice. The stress of the situation was making his tics much worse, and now his whole body was trembling slightly. Lisa pulled him closer to her side, wishing she had never come into this store. "What store policy is that?" Keanu asked, moving closer to Derek. Even though Keanu wasn't trying to be threatening, there was something about his presence that made Derek feel smaller. "Well," Derek said, his voice getting higher, "we have the right to refuse service to customers who might damage our merchandise." "This boy hasn't damaged anything," Keanu said calmly. "He bumped a display stand that didn't even fall over." "He could have broken something expensive," Derek argued. "And all that noise he's making is disturbing other customers." As if to prove Derek's point, Billy's tics got even worse. He made a loud barking sound that echoed through the store, followed by a series of clicks and a full-body jerk that made him stumble slightly. Several other customers turned to look, and Billy's face went bright red with embarrassment. "I want to go home, Mom," Billy whispered, tears starting to form in his eyes. "The boy has Tourette's syndrome," Keanu explained to Derek, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel underneath. "It's a neurological condition. He can't control these movements and sounds any more than you can control your heartbeat." Derek crossed his arms and smirked. "Well, maybe people like that should shop somewhere else. This is a high-end store, not a charity." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. She had heard cruel comments about her son before, but never from someone who was supposed to be providing customer service. Her protective instincts kicked in, and she felt her own anger rising. "How dare you," Lisa said, her voice shaking with emotion. "My son is a human being who deserves to be treated with respect. I want to speak to your manager right now." Derek's smirk got wider. He was enjoying the power he felt he had over this family. "The manager isn't here today. I'm the senior sales associate, which means I'm in charge. And I'm telling you that your kid is being disruptive." Amy watched from behind her counter, feeling sick to her stomach. She knew Derek was being horrible, but she was too afraid of losing her job to speak up. She had student loans to pay and couldn't afford to make Derek angry with her. "Disruptive?" Keanu repeated, his voice getting colder. "A 10-year-old child with a medical condition is disruptive?" "Look, buddy," Derek said, turning to face Keanu fully. "I don't know who you think you are, but this is none of your business. Why don't you go back to looking at whatever cheap watch you were eyeing and let me handle my customers?" By now, other people in the store had stopped their shopping to watch what was happening. An elderly couple near the engagement rings were shaking their heads in disgust at Derek's behavior. A young woman with her teenage daughter was recording everything on her phone, though Derek hadn't noticed yet. Billy made another loud sound, this time a series of rapid clicks followed by what sounded like a whistle. His shoulder jerked so hard that he knocked into his mother's purse, causing it to slip off her arm and hit the floor. Some of the contents spilled out, including Lisa's wallet and car keys. "See?" Derek said triumphantly, pointing at the scattered items. "I told you he was trouble. Now he's making a mess all over my clean store." "That's enough," Keanu said, and something in his tone made everyone in the store go quiet. "You're talking about a child who can't help his condition. Where's your basic human decency?" Derek laughed, but it was a nervous sound now. "Human decency? I'm running a business here, not a daycare center for special needs kids." The cruel words hung in the air like poison. Billy started crying openly now, his tics getting so bad that he could barely stand still. Lisa knelt down to comfort her son while gathering up the things that had fallen from her purse. "Billy, sweetie, it's okay," Lisa whispered, but her own voice was breaking. "We'll go somewhere else." "No," Keanu said firmly. "You shouldn't have to go anywhere else. You came here to buy a gift for your grandmother, didn't you, Billy?" Billy nodded through his tears, making small hiccuping sounds as he tried to control his crying and his tics at the same time. Keanu turned back to Derek, and now his anger was clearly visible. This child and his mother are trying to buy a birthday present for a family member. They have money to spend, they're polite, and they're not hurting anyone. And you're treating them like criminals because of a medical condition. "I don't care what condition he has," Derek shot back. "I care about running a respectable business. People don't want to shop around someone making weird noises and jerking around like that." "You mean people like you don't want to shop around someone different," Keanu corrected. "People with compassion and basic human kindness don't have a problem with it." Derek was getting frustrated now. The stranger was making him look bad in front of the other customers, and he didn't like it. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to mind your own business or I'll call security." "Go ahead and call security," Keanu said calmly. I'd love to explain to them how you're refusing service to a family because their child has a disability." More customers had gathered now, and several of them were openly staring at Derek with disgust. The woman with the phone was still recording, and she had moved closer to get a better angle. An older man in an expensive suit was shaking his head and muttering something about disgraceful behavior. Derek was starting to realize that the situation wasn't going the way he had planned. Instead of looking like he was in control, he was starting to look like the bad guy. But his pride wouldn't let him back down now. "Fine," Derek said, his voice getting louder. "You want to know what I think? I think people with problems like that should stay home where they belong. Normal people shouldn't have to deal with it when they're trying to shop." The store went completely silent except for the sound of Billy's quiet crying and occasional tics. Even Amy gasped at how cruel Derek's words were. That was when someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God, is that Keanu Reeves?" The whisper spread through the store like wildfire. "Keanu Reeves?" someone else said. "The actor?" More people started pulling out their phones, and Derek noticed the sudden change in the crowd around him. He looked more closely at the tall man, who had been defending the kid with the weird tics. The long dark hair, the kind eyes, the calm way he spoke. Derek's stomach dropped as he realized who he had been arguing with for the past 10 minutes. You're that actor guy," Derek stammered, his face going pale. "From the action movies." Keanu nodded once but didn't take his attention away from Billy and Lisa. "That doesn't matter right now. What matters is how you're treating this family." But Derek's whole attitude changed in an instant. His eyes went wide and he started smiling in a fake, desperate way. "Oh wow, Mr. Reeves, I'm such a huge fan. I've seen all your movies. This is amazing." The people in the store were now openly filming everything. The woman who had been recording from the beginning moved closer, making sure she got Derek's face clearly in the video. Other customers were shaking their heads in disgust at how quickly Derek had changed his behavior. "I'm sorry," Derek said, his voice suddenly sweet and fake. "I think there was just a misunderstanding here. Of course we want to help this nice family find something beautiful." Lisa looked up from where she was still comforting Billy. She could see right through Derek's sudden change of heart. "A misunderstanding?" she said, her voice cold with anger. "You called my son disruptive. You said people like him should stay home." "I never said that," Derek lied, even though dozens of people had heard him and several were recording. "I was just trying to make sure everyone in the store was comfortable." "We all heard what you said," the elderly woman near the engagement rings called out. "You were horrible to that poor child." "Absolutely disgusting," her husband added. "In all my years, I've never seen such cruel behavior from someone in customer service." Derek's panic was growing. He looked around at all the angry faces and recording phones. "Please, Mr. Reeves, I'm sure we can work this out. Maybe I can give you a discount on whatever you're looking for today." Keanu's expression didn't change. "I don't want a discount. I want you to apologize to this family for your behavior." "Of course," Derek said quickly. "I'm so sorry for any confusion. Really, I am." But his apology was hollow, and everyone could tell. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was only sorry that he had been caught being cruel in front of a famous person, with cameras rolling. Billy was still crying quietly, his tics worse than ever from all the stress and attention. He made a series of clicking sounds followed by a loud bark that echoed through the store. Instead of the shame he usually felt when his tics were bad in public, Billy noticed something different. The people watching weren't looking at him with disgust or annoyance. They were looking at Derek that way. "Your apology doesn't mean anything," Lisa said to Derek. "You showed your true character today. My son will remember how you treated him for the rest of his life." Derek was sweating now. He could see his job disappearing before his eyes. Videos of customer service workers being cruel to people went viral all the time, and those people usually got fired. Please, I was just having a bad day. I'm not usually like this. Yes, you are, Amy said quietly from behind her counter. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. It was the first time she had spoken during the whole incident. Amy, what are you doing? Derek hissed at her, but Amy had found her courage. Watching Derek be cruel to a child, and then watching him try to lie his way out of it, had finally pushed her too far. You are usually like this, Derek. You make fun of customers all the time. You made fun of the old man with the cane last week. You laughed at the woman who couldn't speak English very well. Derek's face went red with anger and embarrassment. Shut up, Amy. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Amy continued, her voice getting stronger. I've watched you be mean to people for months, and I never said anything because I was scared. But I can't watch you hurt a little kid and then lie about it. The crowd murmured their approval of Amy's honesty. Several people were nodding and saying things like, "Good for her," and finally someone with backbone. Keanu walked over to the display case where the silver necklace still sat. How much did you say this necklace costs? $250, Lisa answered. Plus tax. I'll buy it, Keanu said simply. He pulled out his wallet and placed 3 $100 bills on the counter. Keep the change. Derek reached for the money eagerly, but Keanu put his hand over the bills. Amy will handle the sale, he said firmly. Not you. Amy walked over on shaky legs and carefully lifted the silver necklace with the heart pendant. She placed it gently in a small jewelry box and wrapped it in pretty paper. I'm so sorry about how Derek treated you, she said to Lisa and Billy. It was wrong, and I should have stopped it. Thank you, Lisa said, and she meant it. It takes courage to speak up. Keanu wasn't finished. He walked over to another display case and pointed to a beautiful silver bracelet with small charms shaped like stars. I'd like to buy this too, please, for Billy. Billy looked up through his tears, his tic still making him click and jerk. For me? For you, Keanu said with a gentle smile. Because you handled a very difficult situation with more grace and dignity than the adult who was supposed to be helping you. Derek watched helplessly as Amy rang up the second purchase. He tried one more time to save himself. Mr. Reeves, please. I have student loans. I need this job. Can't we just forget this whole thing happened? Keanu looked at Derek for a long moment. You had many chances to do the right thing today. You could have been kind to a child who was just trying to buy a gift for his grandmother. You could have shown basic human decency. Instead, you chose to be cruel. That choice has consequences. The woman who had been recording the whole time stepped forward. I've got everything on video, she said to Lisa. The whole thing. What he said, how he treated your son, everything. Thank you, Lisa said. I think the store's corporate office would be very interested to see that video. Derek's last hope disappeared. He knew that once the video reached his bosses, he would be fired immediately. Worse than that, it would probably end up on social media, where millions of people would see him being cruel to a disabled child. Billy, Keanu said, kneeling down to the boy's level. I want you to remember something. What happened here today wasn't about you. It was about him, he pointed to Derek. Some people choose to be kind, and some people choose to be mean. But you get to choose how you respond, and you chose to be brave. Billy smiled for the first time since they had entered the store. His tics were still there, but they seemed less violent now. Thank you, Mr. Keanu. Just Keanu is fine, he said with a warm smile. And happy birthday to your grandmother. As they prepared to leave the store, more customers came up to Billy and his mother to offer support and kind words. The elderly couple bought him a small pin shaped like a heart. A teenager gave him a high five and told him he was awesome. Derek stood behind the counter, forgotten and alone, watching his world fall apart because of his own cruelty. The phones were still recording, the customers were still angry, and he knew that by tomorrow, everyone in the world would know what kind of person he really was. By Sunday morning, the video was everywhere. The woman who had recorded Derek's cruel behavior had posted it on social media with the caption, "Jewelry store employee mocks child with Tourette's until Keanu Reeves steps in." Within 12 hours, it had been shared over 50,000 times. Derek woke up to his phone buzzing non-stop with notifications. His social media accounts were flooded with angry messages from people who had seen the video. Someone had figured out his full name and where he worked, and now everyone knew exactly who he was. He sat on his bed, scrolling through comment after comment, calling him heartless, cruel, and worse. People were posting the video on every platform they could find. It was on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. News websites had picked up the story. Even television morning shows were talking about it. Local jewelry store employee fired after video shows him mocking child with disability, read one headline. Keanu Reeves defends boy with Tourette's in viral video, said another. Derek's phone rang. It was his manager, Patricia Hayes. "Derek," Patricia's voice was cold and professional. "I need you to come into the store immediately." "Patricia, I can." "Explain," Derek started, but she cut him off. "There's nothing to explain. I've seen the video. So has corporate. So has half the internet. You're fired, effective immediately. Don't bother coming in to clean out your desk. We'll mail you your final paycheck." The line went dead. Derek stared at his phone in shock. 3 years of work, gone in one weekend because of a stupid video. But his problems were just beginning. By Monday morning, local news crews were camped outside Golden Gate Jewelry. Reporters were interviewing customers about what they had witnessed, and every story made Derek look worse. "I've never seen anything so cruel," the elderly woman who had been shopping for engagement rings told Channel 7 News. "That poor little boy was just trying to buy a present for his grandmother, and that horrible young man treated him like he was some kind of monster." The teenager who had recorded everything was interviewed too. The employee kept making fun of the kid's tics, imitating him behind his back. It was disgusting. Thank God Keanu Reeves was there to stand up for the family. Patricia Hayes held a press conference outside the store on Monday afternoon. Dozens of reporters showed up, along with protesters holding signs that said, "Respect all customers," and "Disability rights matter." Golden Gate Jewelry deeply regrets the incident that occurred at our store this weekend. Patricia read from a prepared statement. "The employee's behavior was completely unacceptable and does not reflect our company's values. He has been terminated." Immediately, a reporter raised her hand. "What steps is the company taking to make sure this doesn't happen again?" "We are implementing mandatory training for all employees on disability awareness and inclusive customer service," Patricia answered. "We are also making a donation of $25,000 to the Tourette Association of America." "Have you spoken to the family that was mistreated?" another reporter asked. "Yes, I personally called Mrs. Martinez to apologize. We have invited the family back to the store for a private shopping experience, and we will be covering the cost of any purchases they make." Meanwhile, Amy Peterson was dealing with her own consequences. She hadn't been fired like Derek, but she had received a formal warning for failing to intervene when she saw a customer being mistreated. "I know I should have done something," Amy told Patricia during their meeting. "I was scared of Derek, but that's no excuse. I let that little boy suffer because I was a coward." Patricia studied the young woman across from her desk. Amy looked genuinely sorry, not like Derek, who had only been sorry he got caught. "You spoke up eventually," Patricia said. "That took courage. But you're right that you should have acted sooner." "I want to do better," Amy said. "I want to learn how to help customers with disabilities." I never want to stand by and watch someone get hurt again. Patricia nodded. You'll be the first one enrolled in our new training program. And Amy? What you did at the end, telling the truth about Derek's pattern of behavior, that was the right thing to do. The Martinez family was overwhelmed by the support they received. Their phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, advocacy groups, and people who just wanted to say they were sorry about what happened. Lisa had to take time off work just to handle all the attention. Billy became famous overnight, but not in a way that made his condition worse. Instead of people mocking his tics, they were celebrating his courage. Children from his school sent him cards and drawings. Adults wrote letters telling him how brave he was. "Mom, look at this one," Billy said, holding up a letter that had arrived in the morning mail. His tics were still there, but they seemed less severe now that he wasn't stressed and scared all the time. Lisa read the letter out loud. "Dear Billy, I saw the video of what happened to you at the jewelry store. I have a son with autism, and people have been mean to him too. Thank you for showing other kids that it's okay to be different. You are a hero." There were hundreds of letters like that. Parents of children with disabilities, adults who had faced discrimination themselves, teachers who worked with special needs students. All of them wanted Billy to know that he wasn't alone. The Tourette Association of America reached out to the family too. "We'd like Billy to be a spokesperson for our awareness campaign," the director told Lisa over the phone. "Only if he's comfortable with it, of course. But his story could help a lot of other families." Billy was excited about the idea. "Can I tell other kids that it's okay to have tics?" He asked his mother. "If that's what you want to do, sweetheart." Lisa said, hugging her son, "You've already helped so many people just by being yourself." Keanu Reeves was getting attention too, but that wasn't unusual for him. What was different was the reason. Instead of talking about his latest movie, reporters wanted to know about his decision to stand up for Billy. "I didn't do anything special," Keanu told Entertainment Tonight when they tracked him down on his movie set. "Any decent person would have done the same thing. That boy and his mother deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Will you stay in touch with the family?" the reporter asked. Keanu smiled. "Billy is a remarkable kid. His grandmother is going to love that necklace." Derek, meanwhile, was discovering how hard it was to find a new job when potential employers could easily find a viral video of you being cruel to a disabled child. He applied to dozens of places, but as soon as they searched his name online, the calls stopped coming. His apartment rent was due, his car payment was overdue, and his student loan payments were piling up. The money he had saved while working at the jewelry store was running out fast. Worse than the money problems was the way people treated him when they recognized him in public. At the grocery store, a woman saw him and loudly told her husband, "That's the man from the video who was mean to the little boy." Other shoppers turned to stare, and Derek had to leave his cart and walk out. He tried going to a job interview at a clothing store, but the manager took one look at him and said, "Sorry, we're not interested." Derek knew the man had recognized him. That night, Derek sat in his dark apartment, scrolling through the comments on the video that had destroyed his life. Most of them were angry, calling him names and saying he deserved everything that was happening to him. But buried among all the hate, he found a few comments that made him think. "This guy needs to learn about disabilities and become a better person," one comment said. "Punishment isn't enough. He needs education." Another comment read, "I hope someday this man realizes how much pain he caused and tries to make up for it." For the first time since the video went viral, Derek started to think about Billy instead of himself. He remembered the look on the boy's face when he had mocked his tics. He remembered how Billy had cried and how his mother had tried to protect him. Derek realized that in all his worry about his job and his reputation, he had never once felt sorry for hurting a 10-year-old child. That realization hit him harder than losing his job had. 6 months had passed since the jewelry store incident, and the world looked very different for everyone involved. Billy Martinez stood at the front of Roosevelt Elementary School's auditorium, looking out at 200 students and teachers. His tics were still there, but they didn't bother him anymore. When his shoulder jerked or he made clicking sounds, he just kept talking. "My name is Billy Martinez, and I have Tourette syndrome," he said into the microphone. "That means my brain makes me do things I can't control, like making sounds or moving in ways that might look strange to you." A third grader in the front row raised her hand. "Does it hurt?" Billy smiled. "No, it doesn't hurt. It just happens. Like how you can't control when you sneeze or when your stomach growls when you're hungry." The children laughed, and Billy felt proud. 6 months ago, he would have been too embarrassed to speak in front of one person about his condition. Now he was traveling to schools all over the state, teaching kids about disabilities and differences. "The most important thing I want you to remember," Billy continued, "is that being different isn't bad, it's just different. And everyone deserves to be treated with kindness, no matter what makes them special." After his presentation, dozens of children came up to talk to him. Some had questions about Tourette's. Others wanted to tell him about their own differences, like wearing glasses or having trouble reading. "You're really brave," a shy girl with hearing aids told him. "I was scared to tell people about my hearing aids, but after seeing your video, I decided I shouldn't be ashamed." Lisa Martinez watched from the back of the auditorium, tears in her eyes. Her son had transformed from a scared, embarrassed boy into a confident young advocate who was helping children all over the country. The Tourette Association of America had hired Billy as their youngest spokesperson ever. He appeared in their commercials, spoke at their events, and his story was featured in their educational materials. The organization's donations had increased by 40% since Billy joined their team. "Mrs. Martinez?" A teacher approached Lisa after Billy's presentation. "I just wanted to thank you for bringing Billy here today. We had a student with autism who was being bullied, but after hearing Billy's speech, several children came forward to defend him. Your son is changing lives." Meanwhile, across town, Derek Collins was finishing his shift at the Sunshine Community Center. He wore a volunteer badge and was helping clean up after the afternoon program for children with special needs. "Derek, can you help me with the art supplies?" asked Maria Santos, the program director. Derek had been volunteering at the center for 4 months now, and Maria had watched him slowly change from a bitter, angry young man into someone who genuinely cared about the children. "Of course," Derek said, gathering up paintbrushes and crayons. A 7-year-old boy with Down syndrome tugged on his shirt. "Derek, look what I made," the boy said, holding up a drawing of a rainbow. "That's beautiful, Carlos," Derek said, kneeling down to the boy's level. "You're a real artist." 6 months ago, Derek wouldn't have been able to imagine himself working with disabled children. The old Derek would have been uncomfortable, maybe even disgusted. But losing his job and becoming a social outcast had forced him to take a hard look at who he really was. The transformation hadn't been easy. For the first 2 months after the video went viral, Derek had been angry and bitter. He blamed Keanu Reeves for ruining his life. He blamed the woman who recorded the video. He blamed everyone except himself. But as the weeks passed and he couldn't find work, Derek had time to think. He started reading about Tourette's syndrome and other disabilities. He learned that children with these conditions often faced bullying and discrimination. He realized that his behavior had been part of a much bigger problem. The turning point came when Derek saw Billy on a local news program talking about his advocacy work. The boy was articulate, kind, and mature beyond his years. Derek remembered how he had mocked this same child, and for the first time, he felt genuine shame instead of self-pity. That's when Derek started volunteering at the community center. At first, Maria was suspicious. She had seen the viral video like everyone else, and she wasn't sure Derek's motives were pure. "I want to learn," Derek had told her during his first visit. "I want to understand what I did wrong and how to be better. Working with these children isn't about making yourself feel better," Maria had warned him. "It's about serving them." "I know," Derek had said. "I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm looking for education." Now 4 months later, Derek was one of the center's most dedicated volunteers. He worked with children who had autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and yes, Tourette syndrome. He had learned to communicate with nonverbal children, to be patient with behavioral outbursts, and to see past disabilities to the amazing kids underneath. "Derek's really good with the children," Maria told her assistant director. "I wasn't sure about him at first, but he's proven himself. The kids love him, and he's learned so much." Derek still struggled with employment. The viral video followed him everywhere, and most employers weren't willing to take a chance on him. But he had found part-time work doing maintenance at the community center, which paid just enough to cover his basic expenses. He lived in a much smaller apartment now, had sold his car, and eaten a lot of ramen noodles. But for the first time in months, Derek felt like he was doing something meaningful with his life. Amy Peterson had thrived at Golden Gate Jewelry after completing the company's new disability awareness training. She had been promoted to assistant manager and was helping to train new employees. "Remember," Amy told a new hire during orientation, "every customer deserves respect and patience. If someone has a disability or seems different, that's not a problem to solve. That's just a person who needs our help." The jewelry store had become a model for inclusive customer service. Other businesses sent their employees to observe Golden Gate's training program. Patricia Hayes had been featured in industry magazines for her response to the crisis. Most importantly, the store had never had another incident of discrimination. Amy made sure of that. She had learned from her mistake of staying silent, and now she spoke up immediately if she saw any employee treating a customer poorly. One afternoon, Amy was working when a familiar figure walked into the store. It was Keanu Reeves, back for the first time since the incident. "Mr. Reeves," Amy said, approaching him with a smile. "It's good to see you again." "Hello, Amy," Keanu said warmly. "I wanted to see how things were going here." "Much better," Amy said honestly. "We've learned a lot. How is Billy doing?" "He's amazing," Keanu said. "Did you know he's writing a book about his experiences? And he's going to speak at a national conference next month." Amy smiled. "I'm not surprised. That kid has more courage than most adults I know." As Keanu browsed the store, Amy noticed how different the atmosphere was now. The employees were more respectful, more aware, more kind. The training had worked. But more than that, Derek's cruel behavior had taught everyone what they never wanted to become. The incident had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. Schools were implementing anti-bullying programs. Businesses were training their staff on disability awareness. Parents were having conversations with their children about acceptance and kindness. One cruel moment had sparked a movement of compassion that was still growing 6 months later. 1 year after the jewelry store incident, Billy Martinez walked onto the stage at the National Convention Center in Washington, D.C. The auditorium was packed with 3,000 people who had come to hear him speak at the annual Disability Rights Conference. Billy wore his best blue suit and the silver bracelet that Keanu Reeves had bought for him a year ago. His tics were still there, making him click and jerk occasionally, but he moved with confidence that would have been impossible to imagine before that day at Golden Gate Jewelry. "Good morning," Billy said into the microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the large room. "My name is Billy Martinez, and exactly 1 year ago today, something happened to me that changed my life forever." In the front row, Lisa Martinez smiled proudly at her son. Next to her sat Keanu Reeves, who had flown in specifically to support Billy's speech. The actor had become a close family friend over the past year, checking in regularly and supporting Billy's advocacy work. A year ago, I was just a kid who was embarrassed by his Tourette syndrome, Billy continued. I tried to hide my tics. I was afraid of what people would think. I felt broken and different in a bad way. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Many of them were parents of children with disabilities, adults with disabilities themselves, or advocates who worked in the field. But then I met someone who was cruel to me, and that cruelty taught me something important. It taught me that some people will always be mean to others who are different. But it also taught me that there are far more good people in the world than bad people. Billy's shoulder jerked to the right, and he made his familiar clicking sound. A year ago, this would have made him stop talking and feel ashamed. Now he just paused for a second and kept going. That day in the jewelry store, I learned that standing up for what's right is more important than being comfortable. I learned that my differences don't make me less valuable as a person. And I learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can become the best things if we let them teach us and help us grow. In the back of the auditorium, Derek Collins watched the speech on a laptop computer. He was at the Sunshine Community Center, where he now worked full-time as a program coordinator. The center couldn't afford to send him to the conference, but they had gathered all the staff and volunteers to watch Billy's speech together. Derek had written Billy a letter 6 months ago, apologizing for his behavior and explaining how meeting the children at the community center had changed his understanding of disabilities. He hadn't expected a response, but Billy had written back with kindness and forgiveness that Derek knew he didn't deserve. You're doing important work now, Billy's letter had said. The kids you help today won't have to face the same ignorance I faced because you're teaching people to be better. Mr. Derek, whispered Maria, a 9-year-old girl with autism who was sitting next to him. Is that the boy from your story? Yes, Derek said softly. That's Billy, the boy I was mean to before I learned how to be kind. Derek had started telling the children at the center about his past mistakes. Not in detail, but explaining how he used to not understand people with disabilities and how working with them had taught him to be a better person. The children forgave him easily, the way children do, and many of them saw him as proof that people could change. On the stage in Washington, Billy was reaching the climax of his speech. This year, I've spoken to over 50,000 students in schools across the country. I've met children with every kind of disability you can imagine. And you know what I've learned? We're not broken. We're not less than. We're just different. And different is beautiful. The audience erupted in applause. Several people were crying, including many of the corporate executives who had come to learn about inclusive practices for their companies. But I want to talk to the people without disabilities too, Billy continued when the applause died down. You have power that you might not realize. When you see someone being treated unfairly because they're different, you can speak up. When you see someone struggling, you can help. When you see someone being excluded, you can include them. Billy looked directly at Keanu Reeves. A year ago, a famous actor could have just walked away when he saw me being mistreated. It wasn't his problem. It wasn't his family, but he chose to help anyway. That choice changed everything, not just for me, but for thousands of other people. After the speech, Billy was surrounded by admirers. Parents thanked him for giving their children hope. Business leaders asked for his advice on making their companies more inclusive. Other young advocates wanted to learn from his example. But the moment that mattered most to Billy came when a 12-year-old girl with cerebral palsy approached him in her wheelchair. Billy, she said, her words coming slowly but clearly, I saw your video last year, and it made me brave enough to try out for my school play. I got the part of the narrator, and now other kids with disabilities want to be in the next play too. Billy knelt down next to her wheelchair, his eyes filling with tears. That's amazing. You're amazing. No, the girl said with a big smile. We're all amazing. Later that evening, at the conference dinner, Billy was presented with the Young Advocate of the Year award. As he stood at the podium holding his trophy, he thought about how much had changed in just 12 months. "This award doesn't belong to just me," Billy said. "It belongs to my mom, who taught me to be brave. It belongs to Keanu, who showed me what it means to stand up for others. It belongs to Amy at the jewelry store, who learned to speak up when something is wrong. It even belongs to Derek, who showed me that people can change and become better." In different parts of the country, people who had been touched by Billy's story were making their own differences. Amy Peterson had started a nonprofit organization that trained retail workers on disability awareness. The training program had been implemented in over 200 stores across 5 states. Patricia Hayes had been promoted to regional manager, partly because of how well she had handled the crisis at Golden Gate Jewelry. She now oversaw diversity and inclusion training for the entire jewelry store chain. The woman who had recorded the original video had become an advocate for citizen journalism, encouraging people to document discrimination when they saw it. Her video had been viewed over 10 million times and was used in corporate training programs around the world. Even Derek's story had become part of the larger narrative. He had been featured in several articles about redemption and second chances. The community center where he worked had seen a significant increase in volunteers, many of them people who had made their own mistakes and wanted to do better. "The beautiful thing about Billy's story," Keanu said during his own speech at the dinner, "is that it shows us who we can all choose to be. We can choose kindness over cruelty. We can choose inclusion over exclusion. We can choose to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down." As the evening wound down, Billy found himself standing with Keanu outside the convention center, looking up at the stars. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if that man at the jewelry store had just been nice to me from the beginning?" Billy asked. Keanu considered the question. "Maybe you would have had a pleasant shopping experience and gone home. But then thousands of other children wouldn't have heard your message. Sometimes the hardest moments in our lives become the most important ones." Billy nodded, making his soft clicking sound. "I'm glad it happened. Is that weird?" "Not weird at all," Keanu said. "You turned something ugly into something beautiful. That's what heroes do." Billy smiled. Tomorrow he would fly home to California, back to his regular life as a 6th grader who happened to be changing the world one speech at a time. But tonight, standing under the stars with his friend, he felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing your life has meaning and purpose. The jewelry store incident had lasted less than an hour, but its effects would ripple forward for generations. Children who heard Billy's story would grow up to be more accepting adults. Companies that implemented inclusive training would create better workplaces. And somewhere, in classrooms and boardrooms and living rooms across the country, people would remember the day a 10-year-old boy with Tourette syndrome taught the world what courage really looks like.